Wait a couple more minutes for people to join. I'll just start slowly. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Ana Canhoto. I will be delivering the session today. And we designed a survey to gather a bit of evidence about how you are using generative AI in research and why, or if you're not, why not? So if you could complete it, it would be really helpful for us. You have the QR code here. Some of you completed the survey before the session, but if you haven't and you could do that now, we would really appreciate it so we can continue improving what we offer and how we help you. So this is being recorded and we will be sharing the recording with you as well as the slides. So don't worry about it. We will be sharing the materials with you. Now, we want you to be engaged with the presentation as much as possible. What do you say, Jenny? Do you think we should start with a couple minutes?
Yeah,
is Francisco here? I think Francisco.
yeah.
I'm here.
Would you like to? I'll stop sharing. Would you like to?
Don't stop sharing. Don't stop sharing. That's
Okay.
absolutely fine. I won't take much of your time. I'm Franciscos Filipeos. For those of you that you haven't come across me, I'm the director for the South and East Network for Social Sciences. And I'm just here to say a big welcome to everyone. This is the first webinar out of a series focusing on artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence, and the way we use it in research. The schedule has already been published. We aim to have a webinar almost every 2 to 3 weeks. And then we will be finishing this round of webinars with a face-to-face session during our annual conference hosted by Cranfield University. We put a lot of effort and a lot of thinking into this series, trying to cover all different areas that a researcher would like to know or should know about artificial intelligence. And I just want to say again, a thank you to Anna for leading the project, and to Jenny for coordinating, and just to say welcome and thank you for attending this session. Anna, over to you.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. So you should be seeing my slides again now, right? Right, Jenny? Perfect. So hello again. My name is Ana Canhoto. I'm a professor of digital business at the University of Sussex, where I do research around service digitalization, and I teach research methods. And I'm also the deputy director for DTP1. So I work closely with Franciscos, and I'll be running this session today, which is the first one in the series of generative AI in research. Why are we doing this? I think we can all agree that generative AI is taking the world of research by storm. Last year, 2023, there was an estimated 60,000 papers that had been published, that had been written using LLMs, so large language models, which is one type of generative AI. And a survey of papers submitted to AI conferences suggests that just under 20% of the reviews were actually substantially or totally generated by these same type of technology, large language models. So, and I did a quick review of the literature looking at papers talking about the use of generative AI in research. So these are not papers where generative AI was used or not used. These are papers, methodology papers, that specifically discuss the use of generative AI in research with, say, tutorials or things like that. And you see that people are talking about the use of generative AI across all stages of research, right? Problematization, so coming up with research questions, finding a suitable topic, some papers talking about the use of generative AI in literature review. And for instance, there is even an argument that generative AI could help makes research in different languages more accessible. Many of us, when we do literature reviews, we end up doing just in English, reviewing papers in English, and maybe our mother tongue, possibly. We don't really explore other languages when we do literature review. It could be that generative AI could address that, for instance. The papers talk about using generative AI to collect data or generate data, for instance, in simulations. And it says here, and they say that could be address some of the challenges, like we know I know, and I think you're experiencing that as well, how difficult it is to recruit participants, that people are tired of doing surveys, people are busy, or maybe you can recruit from a group, but find it difficult to recruit from others. For instance, groups where people, you may find people that are not very busy, but very difficult to recruit people from other groups that may be very busy, people, for instance, working mothers, right? Or some fatigue, some respondents could be tired of being researched. There are some groups that are over-researched. For instance, at Sussex, we had an issue with people researching transgender community, and they feel that we're not here, we're not objects to be researched, leave us alone sometimes, right? So this could be addressed, those challenges. There was some suggestion that generative AI could be better than humans at coding data, for instance, because it doesn't get tired, it doesn't get hungry, it's not, you don't have inconsistencies between 2 or 3 different coders. There are no language issues, so it could even be better. And then, of course, there are others, the use of generative AI to actually write documents, either write outputs themselves or disseminate items. And this study by Pividori and Green, they used generative AI to edit 5 papers that they were working on, and it took them an average of 5 minutes or 50 cents per manuscript to review. It greatly improved readability and even found errors. So if they had used an editor, a human editor, it would have been much more expensive and maybe not so good. Right? But against this kind of optimist scenario promise, we have the reality that social sciences are lagging behind in the use of generative AI. And maybe you'll find that this is good, but whether or not we need to decide whether this is good or not. But it seems that most of the papers that are using generative AI to be as part of the research, they are from biomedics or computer science or so on, not from social sciences. There is also a gender gap, with more men than women engaging with technology. And this gap is prevalent even in the young segment. So people in the 18 to 24 years old, there are more men than women using generative AI. And this could have an implication, for instance, in terms of employability or earning potential, right? If when you finish your studies, you go into an environment where people are expected to know to use generative AI critically, then those that do not engage with it, either because they're social sciences or because of gender, they might be at a disadvantage. And this is a particular problem because the evidence is starting to emerge that people that are very confident about their own skills, they are more critical when engaging with generative AI. So people that have a high confidence in generative AI, they are less critical, just to take the output and use it. Whereas people that are more confident in their skills, including to spot mistakes in generative AI, they are more critical in their use and use it better. So because of these, we at SENSS decided to develop a generative AI program, which it starts today and includes a number of other sessions that Jenny has shared with you, and we will share a link to those other sessions at the end. And we approach this from 2 perspectives. One is first of all, we feel that it's important to develop an awareness of AI capabilities, develop a basic understanding of how AI works, and therefore what are their strengths and what are the weaknesses. So I'll start with, because of course we want to make sure that we use generative AI effectively. We're not wasting time. We're not using AI for things that are wrong or will end up using more of our time than if we did it manually in the first place. So in order to develop this understanding of what is effective and ineffective use of AI, I want to start by having a very, very quick primer of how AI works, right? And I'm not from computer sciences, I'm from social sciences. So this is a very public common sense view of AI. So if you have a computer science, please don't be offended for this very simplistic approach of AI. So the first thing I would like to say is that AI is a system. Sometimes when we talk about artificial intelligence or AI, we only think about the computation itself. So there is something that happens in this black box. There is a computer that works, and there is something out, right? But the algorithm, and we call this computation, this calculation, we call the algorithm. But this algorithm does not exist in isolation, right? The algorithm only works if we input data. So this data could be, I could have a question, for instance, help me develop my research question about blah, 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 blah. It could be, for instance, the bank Or it could be me asking Siri, what's the weather like? It could be the bank inputting all my data, salary data, household composition, and so on, to calculate my credit score. It could be, for instance, a self-driving car looking at people crossing the road and holes and so on, and making decisions about where to drive. So these inputs go into the algorithm must be able to access these inputs, performs a computation, and then creates an output. So the output could be just information that I may decide to ignore. So for instance, I ask Siri, what's the weather like today? And Siri says, well, it's going to rain. And I look outside and say, Siri, you're crazy, because I can see it's nice and sunny. Or it could be something that is accumulated with, for instance, could be semi-automated in the case of credit scores. If the score is above or below a certain threshold, it's immediately accepted or rejected. But if it's within more of a narrower gap, then there are further investigations, right? Or it could be entirely automated, which is the case of self-driving cars. Whereas if the self-driving car, if it spots an obstacle, it will stop, for instance, right? And the key for the system to work well is that there needs to be a really good fit between the characteristics of each of these components and what I'm using the system for, right? So I wouldn't want to use a system that would produce an automated output if it's likely to make several mistakes, right? I wouldn't want to use something that only processes text data if none of my inputs are text data, they are voice data, right? So it's important that you understand the fit between the system and what I'm trying to do to decide if the system is effective or not effective. And when we talk about here, the task here, it will be, of course, in our case, it's about PhD work or research work more generally. So let's look at what is an algorithm then. Let's look deeper at this. What is an algorithm? And again, I apologize if this is too basic for some of you. An algorithm is effectively a set of instructions. It's a recipe, right? When something happens, this happens. If Anna asks me the question, what's the weather like? I will access BBC, whatever, and I will say whatever, I'll read whatever is written in that page. So it's like a recipe, right? In the recipe, the input will be the ingredients, so the bit in the middle. The output will be some pancakes. Yesterday was pancake day. So of course, you search for pancake recipes. And then the algorithm is the bit here on the right, which says step 1, put ingredients here, then whisk it, step 2, let it rest, step 3. That's what an algorithm is, right? Effectively. It's a recipe for what to do in the presence of certain ingredients, certain inputs. And some of these algorithms are developed manually, like this one, someone, maybe Jamie Oliver or whatever, they put a recipe together. And in other cases, the recipe, the set of instructions is developed through machine learning. What I mean by machine learning is that the computer will discover the recipe by itself. They will develop the recipe. And you can develop this recipe in a number of ways. One is what we call supervised learning. In supervised learning, I give the computer a set of data with labels, and they use this set of data and the labels to make predictions or classify the rest of the data. So for instance, I may give the computer, say, here is all my customers, and here is what makes for a good customer. Now you go and tell me who are the good customers, right? Or you go and tell me if I go into this market, who will be my good customers, right? So there is supervised in the sense that I give data, but I also give the computer the labels for what I'm trying to classify. So this is good for predict inflation, or to do classification, like for instance, medical imaging, like this is the signals of breast cancer. Now here are lots of x-rays, go and see if there is breast cancer in these x-rays. The other type is unsupervised learning. So unsupervised learning, I do not attach any labels. I just give it lots of data, and then the computer is going to put data into groups. So these groups are groups that have similar characteristics. For instance, segments of customers. So I see that I have a big group of customers, for instance, in the Essex area, and the groups of customers in the north, and groups, right? Or it could be things that happen together. For instance, it could be that on Friday night, I noticed that people buy beer and nappies together, baby diapers, right? I noticed that on Fridays, I have a peak that whenever people buy nappies, they also buy beer. There is no label whether this is good or bad. It's just an observation that these things happen together. And why is this? Because usually people may run out. If you have a baby, you run out of nappies, you rush to the supermarket. And because you're not going anywhere, you might also buy some beer or wine or something to have at home. Then there is a third version of machine learning, which is reinforced. So reinforced is I give it all the information, but I also give it a goal. So I say, here algorithm, here are all my customers, here is whatever, and here is my goal. I want to maximize repeat visits. I want to maximize short-term goal profit. I want to maximize long-term profit. So I give it a goal. The goal is not just classifying, as in the case of supervised learning, but it will try to maximize a specific output. This is what happens, for instance, with GPS navigation, where you have several possible routes, and then you have a goal which could be the fastest one, or the one where you don't pay tolls, or the one where you always go through the highway. Or it could be control, as in the case of emergent systems or self-driving cars. So we see three types of machine learning. And now there is another type of learning, which is the one used by generative AI, which mixes supervised and unsupervised learning. So in machine, the type of deep learning happens in layers, and it's a type used by LLMs, for instance. So you will give it inputs, just like all the other types of machine learning we talked about. In this case, we gave text from Wikipedia, media articles, journal papers, all these other text. And then, and this was the input for training. And you see here on the left-hand side, some how the text that has been used. We see that with GPT-4, for instance, it was used, if you see that 100 billion words are produced by so far by whole human text, GPT-4 is approaching that limit already of all the words, being able to process all the words. Then there is there are layers in the middle where, so this would be, the first one is supervised learning. And then we have the second one, which is unsupervised learning, where it's saying, okay, calculate the probability of certain words, tokens, which the GPT doesn't know these are words. It just knows it's tokens, right? Pieces of data of coming together. And to do that, it uses a certain connection, so computing power. And we see that, for instance, what we can see here at the bottom is that there is a diminishing returns, right? You invest lots and lots of money to create this computing power, but the ability to, it's starting to decrease. And we have the human brain has around 100 trillion connections, and GPT has 1 trillion. So it's getting closer, but it's still far away. And of course, we're running out of data, new data to train it. So this is going to plateau at some point. And then you have the output, right? So we trained LLMs like ChatGPT to come out the probability, and then the output will be words, tokens. Again, it doesn't know it's words, it just knows it's a token that usually come together when I have this type of text. So if I give it a prompt like the cat sat on the GPT will calculate the next most likely prompt, which could be any of those here. And what this is showing us is that the more specific my prompt, the more likely to get the correct words next, right? If I say, I'm in my house, in my bed, so the cat sat on it's more likely to say bed than say bench, because bench is a garden and I'm not in the garden, I am at home. Right, so we see how Chat GPT works. And then there is one last thing I want to talk about, which is that we can take these models and then through a process of feedback, I can fine tune the model. So whenever, for instance, you ask something on ChatGPT or on Google Translate and then asks you to give an thumbs up or ups down, we are fine tuning the model. We're telling the model what is right and what is wrong, so that in the next iteration, it doesn't say table, it says bed or bench, right? You can also fine tune in terms of specific domains. So we see, for instance, Notebook LM has been fine tuned to work with for research purposes, because it allows you to probe data, specific documents. Whereas, for instance, Google Translate, which is another example of generative AI, has been developed, optimized for a specific task, which is translate between languages. So you can have DeepSeek has been optimized, for instance, to not give certain answers, has been fine-tuned to not produce certain answers, for instance, around Tiananmen Square. Grok has been trained on Twitter data. And 2 weeks ago, if you ask Grok for examples of misinformation, you would hear they will give you examples from Trump and Musk. But now if you ask it, you don't get those examples because the model has been fine-tuned. Okay, so let's just take a pause here just to summarize what we've seen so far. So in summary, Gen AIs are statistical models. They are not knowledge models. When I ask the cat set on, it has no idea where the cat is. It doesn't even know what a cat is. It just knows that after the tokens the cat is on, there is a statistical probability that those words will come. So if you cannot assess whether the output is true, you should not be using it because you have no way, the model doesn't know. So you have no way of knowing if the answer is correct or not, right? So you should only use generative AI if you know the context and can assess the quality. Then the other thing to remember is that models, they are trained. So in the case of ChatGPT, we had this Wikipedia and journals and so on. They are trained based on data. So whenever we use GPT, we can get new combinations of the data, but we cannot get new knowledge. If no one wrote a certain word, we will not get that word in the output. What we can get is new combinations. So for instance, if you're trying to think about developing a drug for treat an illness, it can find new combinations of elements that people have found, but it cannot find a new element. So it cannot create something entirely new, but can combine old things in new ways. We need to be aware, because it's used on data, we need to be aware of the gaps. So what is not present in those training data sets and biases. So I don't know if you have any Portuguese speakers in here, but I'm from Portugal, and I asked you to translate this sentence, the doctor is happy, the nurse is happy, in European Portuguese. And it translated in this way. Now, if we have any Portuguese speakers here, they will tell you this is grammatically correct. This sentence is grammatically correct. The first one is the doctor is happy. The second one is the nurse is happy. But Portuguese, as a Latin language, has masculine and feminine, right? So we have feminine and masculine versions of the word doctor and feminine and masculine versions of the word nurse. And when ChatGPT translated this sentence, it assumed that the doctor was male and the nurse was female. So it brought a bias, a social bias, a stereotype into this translation, right? That you need to be aware of. The model also reflects how it has been fine-tuned. So beware of, for instance, if you know that people are giving it thumbs up and thumbs down, and women are not using generative AI, it is only getting thumbs up from men, for instance, or from computer scientists, not social scientists. So who is giving feedback? How is this shaping the next iteration of the model? It reflects commercial interests. For instance, Grok, as I said, is only using Twitter data and doesn't want you to think bad things of Elon Musk, so that is going to be cleaned. It reflects political influence, like the one with DeepSeek and so on, right? So all of these will influence the results. And remember that the closer the fit between the domain and what you're trying to do, the better the performance will be. So if your domain is not reflected in the training data, then the result will always be poor. Any questions so far? We're going to have an activity, for you to do, but any questions, any clarification about what I said so far, all this kind of whistle-top view?
There's nothing in the chat so far, Anna.
Okay. So we'd like you to put you into groups. Now that we've explained how generative AI works and what we would like you to take 10 minutes, we're going to put you into groups, and we'd like you to please reflect on, so thinking about your tasks, what you do in part of the PhD, and knowing, so we know what you need to do and you know how Gen AI works, what you think would be effective versus ineffective uses. And then also, do you think that then using generative AI is compatible with the learning outcomes for a PhD? And you will see the learning outcomes on your university page. This is one I found online, and it says that in order to do a PhD in social sciences, you need to pursue original research and make a significant contribution to knowledge. You need to relate what you find to a body of knowledge. You need to present the results in a scholarly way, and you need to produce material worthy of publication. Is that the question in the chat, or yeah?
Yeah, I'll put that in the chat.
Oh, okay, those are your questions. Thank you. So Jenny, can we put the team? We're gonna have 10 minutes for this and we'll ask and then we'll reassemble, okay? Jenny, do you want to put the people in?
Yeah, I'll put you all in groups now.
Thank you. I can see there are still 11 people here in the main room.
Yeah, I tried to join the group, but I don't know what happened. It just disconnected and I joined back.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, it might be. Let me assign you. You should have got an invite to join the room.
Or we think we could move people to the room.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't get it. Should I join a room or you will assign
Yes,
me to
please,
a room?
please, if you could
Yeah.
join. the room.
Any room available?
You should have got an invite to join room 2.
I don't think I got an invite.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yes, okay.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Rhiannon and Katie. Noted. Okay, so I just sent a message to all groups saying 2 more minutes and then we'll reconvene. Okay, do you think we should bring them, we should close the rooms, maybe,
Close the rooms.
please? Thank you, Jenny. Excellent. I think people are coming back to the main room. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you had fruitful discussions. So we'd like to spend a few 5 minutes now, kind of hearing from you, what you found, for instance, in terms of effective uses of generative AI. What did you find when you think about your PhD tasks? What you think would be good uses? Who would like to use your microphone and share? Someone?
Yes, good afternoon.
Hello?
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for the insight. My name is Victor. Yeah, actually, the ChatGPT, one of the AI tool, has been very, very useful just to prompt, the research insights, just to give you a clue to what you write. But like one of my mates just said, we have to be careful using it. But again, it can give us ideas to what we want to write, then we can develop, then we'll reference. We have to do adequate references. So yeah, and but again, my fear and is the limitation, to know the limit, because when you keep asking, it keep giving you. So as a PhD student, what's our limit, using AI to generate insight.
Excellent. Okay. So that's a great start. Other ideas about how we think it would be useful for your PhD? What in terms of the strengths and weaknesses based on this? Go ahead. Hadil.
Yeah, I found it good in terms of summarizing, editing, and rewriting.
Okay, go ahead, Hadil. Summarizing writing. Okay.
Yeah, editing, but I cannot over rely on what the ChatGPT, for example, produced, because it sometimes present fake references and
Okay.
unrelated ideas, or it, for example, rely on previous chats or prompts that I have asked before 10 months or so. Yeah, there should be an awareness of what what these tools produce, and we have to critically assess the outputs.
Did you say it was bad because it built on things you had asked 2 months ago, or because it hadn't?
No, it based on something that are not related to the new, for example, topics that I'm discussing now in the moment.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to move on to, I think Carol wants to talk. That's great. Just to say, we're going to have more sessions and we're going to explore how to use these tools effectively. So in your case, Adil, you would want to create new chat topics, and then it only picks up on those chat topics and not something else. But yeah, great. So another great contribution. Other users, other different users, new good users and new bad users. Someone would like to contribute?
Yes, I can talk about I'm from the science area in engineering, and
Okay.
I found that when you use it for like ask to write the Python coding or some kind of like these conversions of units, so this kind of science area is excellent because like the Python, if you put write kind of command into it, and then in in a minute you get all the whole code.
So let me ask, when you say that it's great for Python, do you know how to code in Python yourself?
Yes, I know a little bit,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
when you do that, sometimes you still have to have to write the codes and this, but with the ChatGPT, you don't even need to write the code. You write the sort of the questions or the purpose of what you want, and
Yeah.
then it's come with all the code, and you can just click copy and then paste it into Python, and then it's all finished. So,
And tell me,
I think that in IT we start to use quite a lot of this AI to do the coding because it's much
and the
faster.
problem you found, a weakness? Any?
The weakness, I think that is more like sometime if you ask for some source of information or maybe literatures and things, it's more like sometimes it doesn't really give you that. But when it's come to very technical thing, I think that is very good.
Okay, thank you. I can see also some comments in the chat. So I think and it's good that you all managed to find good users and weak users. If I think, and it's very important that as you go away from this session, you brainstorm these more. And as I said, you will develop more awareness of these as you complete the other sessions in this series. But overall, I would say that generative AI strengths, generative AI is very good at summarization, as some people mentioned. You have a text and say, please summarize this. I use it a lot, for instance, in what we call reverse paragraph planning. I play the manuscript and I ask it to summarize each paragraph into one line. And then I use it to see if my argument is flowing or if it's getting tangled up, for instance. So it's very good at summarization. It's very good at providing common sense examples because it's based on so much text you can please give me examples from Shakespeare's work to do something, or metaphors. And because it's so quick and cheap, you can use it to brainstorm and experiment, though it seems that, for instance, there is some research that says that it's more creative than one person individually, but less creative. It seems like the tipping point is 8. So if you're doing something alone, then GPT can help you find alternative views on the problem. But if you're in a group, actually, it's better to do it with humans than with GPT. You will want to use specialized generative AIs, as we mentioned, because of the domain training. And because it's machine learning, it will learn from your previous conversations. So if you go back to a chat you had before, it's good to use it as a coach or as an interlocutor. So you told me to do this. I did that. This was the result. What have I failed to consider? Things like that. Conversely, Mark Harrigan has a very helpful book called Generative AI for Academics, where he talks about how some principles to interact with generative AI and develop in terms of experimentation. Conversely, you want to avoid using generative AI because of the problem with hallucinations or mistakes. You do not want to use it outside of your domain of knowledge. And that's why I asked this computer science student whether they knew how to do Python, because I don't know how to code in Python. I have no idea if the instructions are correct or wrong. So because it's statistical model, not knowledge model, you should not use it when you cannot verify if the answer is correct or not correct. You should also use it if bias is important, you should not use it. So if you want to make sure that, for instance, is not translating doctor for female for male and nurse for female, you should not use it because you know it's going to be biased. Be aware of censoring, like the example I gave you from Grok and DeepSeek. Because machine learning is always learning, it has poor replicability, so you should not use it for uses where you have to produce the exact same result every time. Right? If you're trying to come up with, say, this is why it could be not good for data analysis, because if you need to come up with the same result every time, machine learning is always learning, it's producing new results, so it's not going to work. Remember that at the end of the day, generative AI are plagiarism machines. What I showed you about how it works, right? It takes all the text and assembles it and gives it. So it will never produce something that is truly original. It's only reassembling what has been produced before, and because of this, you cannot use the outputs directly either. Okay. Exactly. I see some great comments here. I can see it's better for small groups. Exactly. So Justin, it seems to be more creative if until groups of 6, 7, 8. After 8, humans are more creative than using AI. But I would like to move. So we looked at effective versus ineffective uses of generative AI, but that's not the only parameter we should consider when thinking about how to use the technology. Think about electricity, right? Nowadays, we are 21st century. We use electricity for everything. And in fact, and the problem occurs, actually, sometimes we only think about electricity if something breaks down and we don't have electricity. Right? If you have an electric car and you can't find a place to recharge it, you start stressing. In fact, if you think about, for instance, in terms of the media, you see films where blackouts create chaos and riots in the countries and so on. But this wasn't always like that. In the 19th century, it was the opposite. Electricity was considered some sort of dark magic. It was used to revive people who used it to make dead frogs' legs move. Even in science, you had Frankenstein, so bringing back someone from the dead through electricity, right? So even though the electricity itself, the technology hasn't changed fundamentally, the way we use it and the way we think about it has changed dramatically from the 19th century to the 20th century and now to the 21st century. And this is because we live in 3 levels in the world. We don't just live in a technical level of technology. We also have rules and regulations and protocols for the use of technology. We call this the formal level. And we have informal rules, so values, beliefs, habits. And this all influences how we use the technology. We don't just use technology, electricity technology in a particular way. We may use it to the full potential or not, depending on how the world sees it as dark magic or something really positive. And it's the same with AI. So that's why in this course, in this session, I want you to also think about social norms, formal and informal, ruling the use of AI in PhDs, right? Because you don't want to find something that is effective to use, but then it's deemed cheating, and you are penalized for doing that, either formally or informally. Or you don't want to waste time trying to improve an effective way of using something if it's frowned upon by society, and it's just a complete waste of your time, futile use, because even if you find an effective way to do that, it will still be frowned by society. So what are the rules that are relevant for PhD students specifically, or researchers more broadly? One, it will be, of course, formal rules. So direct rules telling what you can, as a researcher, what you can and cannot do with generative AI. And at the moment, because this is so new, we do not have a lot of rules, specific rules, right? Formalized rules. What we have few rules, and they are very vague. So if you look, for instance, on the ESRC website about their policy on generative AI, it's very vague. It just says you need to use it with integrity, in a proper way, and things like that. So really, the rules for following our use of AI are indirect. So there we are bound by data protection policies, and that influences how we should use generative AI. We are bound by academic misconduct policies, and then guides how we should use AI. right? So the rules here are, so when you think about using generative AI, you need to think about, is this violating all the other policies that I'm bound to as a researcher, like data protection, academic misconduct, and so on. And then there are also informal rules, like you do your PhD as part of a group of stakeholders. There is you, there's your advisor, there's the department. So this is from a PhD in actually computer sciences. So this is an example, right? So there are some internal stakeholders. There will be externals. So for instance, you want to understand what is the Viva examiner's view of what constitutes an original contribution. You don't want to do something and then come to your Viva and realize the examiner thinks using generative AI means you've not created something new and it's going to fail you because of that. There are also external stakeholders. For instance, the most obvious one will be the publisher, journal publishers. And if you look, for instance, there is a recent editorial in the Information Systems Journal saying that when it comes to data analysis, you can't do it with generative AI. It needs to be done by humans, manually or with software, but you need to understand, you need to do the coding of qualitative data yourself, for instance. Actually, I think it's qualitative and quantitative data. So you are going to do, you don't want to waste time doing data analysis using generative AI and then submit to Information System Journal and realize the paper is not going to be accepted because of that. And of course, you have society at large, right? What society's view of what a researcher should be doing and how research should be done may mean that your work is accepted or not. And remember, these changes, that's the point of this session. Nowadays, society may think that researchers need to do the work themselves, but maybe in 1 or 2 years' time, when you finish, your employer will expect you to know how to use generative AI rules. And you need to pay attention to how this is changing. This is going to be, all these issues are going to be explored, these formal and informal expectations are going to be explored by Fragiskos in session 2 of this series, right? So you're going to explore what the key stakeholders in research are, what are the views emerging here. And you may also want to consider your personal values. It's true that generative AI has high environmental and social costs. People are losing jobs. Training all this data is horrible for the environment. There is issues of exclusion and inclusion, right? And you may personally decide that you do not want to use it, and it's your choice, right? I have an example here on the right-hand side. This is a researcher, an independent researcher, and she posted this blog post. She wrote this blog post last week saying she refuses to use generative AI because she thinks the environmental costs and the social costs are, because it's built on stolen data, stolen text, so she decides not to use it. So you want to think about how is the generative AI use aligned with social norms or not? So some examples, it seems that it's okay to use for summarization, but you should not be using it to write abstracts. Journal editors, most journal editors will say that you cannot use generative AI to create substantial portions of text. Most editors will say that you can use it to improve, but not to create text, for instance. That's the norm that is emerging at the moment. This may change. You can use to improve text readability, namely if you are producing things for public engagement, non-academic audiences, but you cannot use it to produce academic outputs. Again, this is the norm. I'm not saying this is right or wrong. The norm seems to be that you cannot write a paper. You should not be writing a paper using generative AI, but it's okay to write dissemination things for newspapers or audiences and so on. It seems to be good for exploration. For instance, there is always a point in your paper or PhD when you need to write implications for practice, and you may use it to think about, ask ChatGPT to organize your impact into short-term and long-term, right? And what else you may be forgetting, these kind of things. So the idea, it seems to be, the norm seems to be that it's okay to use this as long as ChatGPTs are partners in a dialogue. You use it as a dialogue partner, as a coach, to help you think through something and improve it. It seems to be for the time being, if you use it to create stuff, to create text from scratch, then it's seen as impersonation and you come into problems of academic misconduct. You may want, for instance, not to use it as search engines like what is the Portuguese version for this, even though I use it as an example, because of the environmental impact, for instance. Data analysis is a very tricky question because it can be helpful. For instance, when I use it for data analysis, it gives me very, very granular categories, much more. I can end up with 4 or 5 categories, and then I run it through ChatGPT and it gives me 2 more that I hadn't considered. However, be careful that you need to be always mindful of data protection. You cannot upload original transcripts. You can only upload anonymized or even just excerpts, not even the whole transcript. And at the end of the day, it is your responsibility to explain the data. So if you don't know how the data was analyzed, how the categories emerged, then you will be in trouble with your examiner and publishers and so on. So clearly, we cannot use AI. As researchers, we cannot use AI to automate academic labor. This will cause you problems in academia. So what we hope, with this framework, we hope that you'll use this framework and your developing understanding of AI capabilities and normative frameworks to start deciding by yourself how to use generative AI. So the issue of ethical use is going to be developed by Franciscus in the next session. And then we have a number of sessions looking at specific use of AI, to how to use AI in an effective manner, for instance, in literature reviews or to collect data and things like that. So that hopefully by the end of these sessions, you'll be able to decide, for instance, by yourself that it's okay to use LLMs, ChatGPT or other to produce public engagement materials, but not to write abstracts for journal, that you should not use it to define concepts because, of course, of hallucination, and also not create references list because you are supposed to do, not only is it wrong, but you are supposed to do that work of finding the references yourself. For instance, in terms of data analysis, you could use it as an additional round of analysis if you use anonymized data. If you use Notebook LM, because then you can go back and check the citations, but not as the only round, or not if you cannot in other ChatGPT, in other LLMs where you do not have access to data, and that you should never use it on non-anonymized data. So this understanding will develop as you complete the other sessions in this series. I also want to share some resources with you. I think you're coming to the end. I'll give you some time for questions, but this video of a talk at the Alan Turing Institute is great in terms of explaining what is generative AI and how it works. This book, AI Snake Oil, is brilliant at telling you what AI can do and what it cannot do, so separating the myth from reality. Ethan Mollick writes regularly. He has this Substack, and he has a consulting position with some LLMs, so he will tell you what's the new model and explain briefly what implications for research and teaching and so on. It's a good source. I already mentioned Mark. He has an interesting book. Shana, she doesn't write specifically about research, but she writes very clearly about generative AI in academic context, so more in terms of teaching and assessment. So even though it's not research specific, I still think it's extremely helpful, and I think it would be a good resource for you. Remember to register for the next session with Professor Philippaios. I see Jenny put the link. The link is on the chat, so make sure you follow it to register. And I think we still have a few minutes for questions. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask me? Do use the chat. I think there is a question about, will the presentation be shared? Yeah, the presentation will be on the VLE, the video and the slides. But what other questions do you have, please?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time and insight. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, if I understand you very well, so we're not to use AI at all for our research, for academics, Is that right?
You can use it for academics. You can definitely use it, for instance, to produce public engagement materials, to summarize items for your own use, as an additional, with anonymized data for an additional round, but not as the only source of analysis. You cannot automate the bottom. You should not use it to automate or replace work, but you can use it to complement what you're doing already. This is the state.
All right,
so
thank you.
This may change.
Thank you. So, well, if we use it, do we have to reference it? Or
So for the time being, and again, the norms may be changing, but for the time being, you are expected, if you publish it for most journals, you are expected to disclose how you use generative AI. So they will offer,
all right, thank you.
in most journals, there is a question saying, how did you use it? And I'm guessing in Vivas, you will have the same emerging.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
The name,
A question about the name of the person to follow on LinkedIn.
here it is. Oh, so you can follow Ethan, you can follow any of them. They are all on LinkedIn. Shana is more in terms of teaching and assessment. Mark Carrigan and Ethan Mollick did talk in terms of research. Well, Mark Harrigan is only research. Ethan Mollick talks about research and also teaching. And then the resources on the left, they are more on the technical side about how it works and so on. So there will be.
And then there was a question about, do you have examples of using as a dialogue partner? Is there going to be a session on this?
So there will be a session. I think there's definitely sessions on literature reviews, for instance. I think there is one about framing the research question. At least we planned one, trying to position your study, frame research questions, things like that. So it will be a session on that. We try to have sessions for all stages of the PhD. The framing of the problem, the literature review, data collection, data analysis, and dissemination. We are planning all of those sessions. And Jenny shared the link with you about all those sessions.
Yes.
Is it okay to use AI to proofread? You can use it to proofread sections of text, but not to create new sessions for you. So for instance, I could not use AI to translate to French because I don't speak French, but I could use it to, I write something in Portuguese and then I could use it to proofread my Portuguese because I speak Portuguese and I could check if it's right or wrong. Almaz. So that was my answer to your question, Almaz. Let me see the questions. Tristan, because AI is a novel technology, where is the balance between conforming to developing norms and advocating for a position that violates these norms? That seems ethical to you. Tristan, I'm going to be very honest with you. You can do that. Okay, so first, these norms are changing. I don't know what's your year of study. If you are in year one, it's possible that by the time you reach 3 or 4, more people will be more comfortable with use and it will be better.
Okay, I want to find out because in my school, for example, there's this issue about not using AI. So the debate, so how much of your data will be secured if, for example, I put a portion of my work for editing or paraphrasing? How safe?
Yeah, so everything you upload, if you're not using, so some universities will have enterprise accounts, usually with Copilot, right? And a notebook LM, they say they do not use your data for training. I don't know if they do it or not. That's what they say.
Okay.
So in theory, in those cases, you could upload your manuscript and then it will still, your rights are protected. But in all other cases, it's not. As soon as you upload something to, say, ChatGPT or any of the other tools, the company holds all your data and uses it to train more. So for instance, you're telling your participants that you can delete that their data is going to be deleted, and you can't deliver on that because the data now belongs to OpenAI.
Mm.
So that's what we mean by data protection. You're promising something to your participants that now you're not able to do because you uploaded your data to OpenAI. So what you might do, for instance, is you can do your analysis on SPSS or NVivo, whatever it is. You come up with your conclusions, and then you can maybe enter a dialogue with ChatGPT about this is the analysis. So you don't input the data, you input the output of the analysis. And these are my key findings. Tell me the 3 findings that I could be missing, or help me rank these from important to least important, these kind of things, right? Or I think these findings have these implications. Which other audiences should I consider? This kind of dialogue, it's okay. But anything that is where you have to upload data, it's not because of data protection. And anything where it's creating something on their own without your input, it's not, because then it's impersonation. But going back to Tristan, I think it's up to you. If you are approaching the end, don't do it. You're going to waste time and energy fighting for something, fighting with an institution that is slow to change. So, and you're going to face the problem of submitting something to a journal that is going to be rejected or that could be withdrawn later on, right? And this is very bad for your proof. If you submit a paper and then later on you're accused of using generative AI and your paper is withdrawn, it's really, really bad for your reputation. It will be there forever in your profile. So I would be caution. I would try to use it within the norms. You can push it lightly, but I wouldn't risk my PhD on that. That's my very pragmatic answer.
Okay. Okay. One last question. I think we should also start thinking about the inclusivity of AI. For me, I'm a blind PhD student, and well, I've found ChatGPT and Copilot very accessible, but I think more the other ones you talked about, LM, I've not used it before, but maybe we can also start thinking about how the level of accessibility some of these generative AI have, especially for persons with disabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely. And disability issues, there could be it's a major factor. So some LMs will allow you to use voice instead of writing. That could be helpful. Others not. But again, you're going to explore this in more specific in the next sessions. But for academics, I try to use Notebook LM because Notebook LM will usually have links to the text, right? So you say, an answer have a link to the text and you can check if it's correct or not. And often it isn't. I had, for instance, I was looking at some transcriptions and then there was this, say that there is this, one of the recommendations was something around Wi-Fi is a big problem. I don't remember anyone talking about Wi-Fi. Then I went to the data and there was nothing there on Wi-Fi. You need to check. You can't, these machines, they seem very clever, but they make lots of mistakes. They're very keen. You need to think of these machines as being very keen, but not as, and very fluent, but not as clever as they seem, right? So you need to be able to check the outputs all the time. So LM is better for that than the others.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? I see it's 3, but
I have one question. And I was wondering, because of these different perspectives about the use of AI and the initial slide that you presented, can you identify, for instance, that AI is being like more accepted within, how can I say, outside the social science? And because maybe like my question goes a little bit like in the direction of what Michael was asking, that to a certain extent, the approach that we are taking in social science to deal with it might be putting us at the end of our development and our skills and our ability to use it, instead of enabling, how can I say, like or the change in electricity and the perception of it, like who is it that it's going to have access to it? And if we're training some now and enabling some people to have access to it now, was how can I say, maintaining a discourse that it doesn't let others have it. How do we?
That's why we're running this course, right? That's why we're running this course, because we think there is value in using generative AI, but we want you to understand how it works. But we're not teaching AI skills. We're teaching AI literacy. We want you to understand how it works so that you can make an educated decision about when to use it. So, and going back to you and what Michael and Tristan are saying, so if you decide to use it, you can justify it. Say, I used this Notebook LM or ChatGPT, whatever, because for that, and I used it in this way and not in that way because of so and so, right? So I feel that we have this we go from, in the initial people were fascinated and said AI is brilliant, we're going to use it for everything, and now people are starting to notice the problems and go to the other end, and I think eventually we will be somewhere in the middle. But until to get to the middle, people need to understand how it works and be able to use it critically, right? And I think that computer scientists understand how it works, social scientists not so much, but that's why we have this. You can understand how it works and make decisions about when to use it and why, and defend your use. That's the point.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Giovanna. Great. I think that's it. Is there
There's a
great.
question about proofreading and paraphrasing, Anna, as well.
And so the same, this is the same thing that you would have with a third party. So you go back to your university policy on using proofreaders, and you follow the same with generative AI, because that's exactly how you're going to do it. If it changes the meaning, if it changes the text substantially, you cannot. If it's just proofreading, and I've had that. So for instance, sometimes when we read, if we're not native speakers like me, you tend to use always the same word, like say, but, right? And then you could use it to say, please help me make these, so it's not always using, or you could even do the other way around, say, please tell me the readability of my text. How can I improve it? So it's not changing, but it's saying, it could tell you you're using the same words too many times, right? Again, use it as a coach, as a ask how you could, don't ask to change the text, ask how you could improve it, and then implement changes would be one way. You have no problem with it. You're not going to be foul of any policies if you do it that way. But if you just input the text and it changes it completely, you could have problems with personation and also change the meaning of what you're trying to say. Could be another problem there.
No other questions in the chat?
Other questions?
No.
No more questions? Okay, thank you for joining us today. Sorry this was so rushed, but it's really a taster. Do join the other sessions where you can go deeper into other specific aspects of generative AI, and especially join the session in 2 weeks' time with Frigiskos about these normative aspects of generative AI.